There we go.
Good evening and welcome to Chaska City Council meeting for Monday, September 10th. We'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Will you please stand and join me in Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Thank you. Just if you're watching and maybe you forgot, but the Chaska Fire Department open house is happening right now. And if you are, you have to be one of the 5 or 7 people that aren't there. I drove by it earlier. So if you feel the need to go there, you still probably have a little bit of time to run there.
Because you don't want to feel left out, you don't want to be one of those 5 or 7 people not there.
So, but anyways, with that, so I'm not sure, but I think it goes
5 to
till
8 p.m., I think?
I think it goes till 8. And in the later half of the evening is when they'll do their burn demonstration. So if you're interested.
Because they're not going to see anything that exciting here.
No.
Hopefully no burn demonstration.
Without a
No.
doubt. So,
Very true.
all right, Nate, will you call roll, please?
Yes, Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
Councilmember Bo.
Here.
Councilmember Rowe is absent. Councilmember Geisler.
Here.
Mayor Winchell.
Here. And as Nate mentioned, Councilmember Rowe is unavailable tonight, so he will not be joining us to the best of my knowledge. That will move on to item number 4, adopting the agenda. Are there corrections or additions to the agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Bo.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Geisler to adopt the agenda. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Post same sign. Motion carries. Moves us on to visitor presentation. I have 2 items on here. First one is a proclamation for Mount Olivet Rolling Acres. Is there anyone here from? No. So I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation for them. And we'll just send it to them. This is a proclamation in recognition of National Direct Support Professionals Recognition Week. Whereas Direct Support Professionals, DSP, are the primary providers of publicly funded long-term support services for millions of individuals with disabilities, and whereas direct support professionals must build close, respectful, and trusted relationship with individuals with disability because they assist them with their most intimate needs, and whereas direct support professionals provide essential support that helps individuals with disabilities stay connected to family, friends, and the community while defining and living their best lives, and whereas direct support professionals provide a broad range of individualized supports including meal preparation, medical assistance, bathing, dressing, mobility, and other daily tasks, and whereas an adequate workforce of high-quality direct support professional is necessary for the state to meet obligations to people with disabilities and minimize more costly settings such as hospitalization or institutional care. And whereas direct support professional is one of the fastest growing positions in America in terms of demand, and yet low wages and demographic trends are creating a growing shortage of direct support professionals, leading to burnout and increased turnover. Whereas public officials have a key role to play in building awareness around advocating for and addressing the issues facing the publicly funded workforce. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Mark Winchell, the mayor of the city of Chaska, on behalf of the city council and the citizens of Chaska, do hereby honor and support the important work of DSPs in our community. The week of September 9th through the 15th, 2018 will be proclaimed DSP Recognition Week in the city of Chaska. In witness whereof, I hereundo set my hand in the seal of the city of Chaska, the 10th day of September in the year of our Lord 2018. So we will present this to them, and I'm sure that finding that quality help does get to be a challenge as we are more and more demand, and that part about the burnout, and I totally can believe that. So hopefully we can do our best to help them.
Just a personal note on that, we, with our son, are on a list to get a personal care assistant, and it's like a year wait to get people to actually come in, and main reason is that their wages are low, the burnout's high. It's, boy, I'll tell you what, it is a thankless, demand is super high. It's a incredible profession to get into, but it's a high stress one. It's something pretty significant that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, it is. So, all right, thank you for that. All right, the next one I have is a stop sign discussion with Kristina Mahler? You may come on up, and just for the record, would you state your name and address? Right there.
The microphone, there you go.
Turn the mic. I mean, is it just,
Like the camera or whatever, or?
is it a mouse just like normal mouses? Okay.
Okay.
So I just got some really exciting visuals for you guys
Oh, very good.
that I didn't get here in time, so I'm just gonna log into my Gmail. So you'll see my latest purchases on Amazon. Let's see here. So we live over in the Cheval neighborhood. If you guys are familiar, half of our particular area of the neighborhood is in Victoria. We're right on the edge on like the top half of Grand Cheval. We connect to 86th.
Can you provide your address for the record?
I sure can. It's 4025 Grand Cheval Parkway. We even got a map of exactly where it is so you can see it. And my name is Kristina Mahler, Mahler.
And now we all know your Gmail address.
Yeah, please don't save that.
Okay.
All right.
We're not our password.
All right.
You're in that computer better than our people do.
Hey.
Okay, so this, I just have a few pictures of our street. And what our main concern is here is the speed limit on our road is 30 miles per hour, which we know is normal. Our road is considered to be over a mile long because it counts all the way from Bavaria all the way to 86th Street, even though technically there's a split and we don't really think it should count that, but it doesn't matter. What you're seeing right here is, I'm really bad at directions, but there's a curve that comes up from the left here, and people come up around this curve very quickly. And right there is where a lot of kids, our main concern, cross the street right at that point. That's where we're asking for a three-way stop, and I'll show you the overhead map in a second. And then this is that same intersection. There's a stop sign right here, right now. We'd like to have one here, and then on the other side of this three-way stop. The curve I was talking about comes in right here. And the work trucks that are in our neighborhood and the people that are still doing construction, they don't really understand to look all the time. Then this is the curve that I'm talking about. And then this is looking down from 86th Street towards that curve. And this is the four-way stop where we would also like to add a stop sign here and on the other side. We currently have stop signs here and here. Just in this area, it's about 1/10 of a mile. We have 30 kids that are ages that would be playing in the streets. That's just on that street. If you count the cul-de-sacs, which there are 2 of, and then the Victoria side, we're looking at more like 90 kids. We have a couple special needs kids who don't necessarily look when they're crossing the street. But to be honest, not all of our kids really look when they're crossing the street anyways. So, and then the overall, this is kind of the 2 intersections we're looking at. You've got 86th Street here. You've got the covered bridge is kind of over down here. This is where you come in on that curve. This is the other area where we'd like to propose the three-way stop. We kind of understand that 30 miles per hour is standard, but if you're sitting on your front porch watching people go by at 30 miles per hour and when your kids are playing out there, it's too fast. So we kind of feel like if we had some stop signs to interrupt that area, it would probably cut back on distracted driving, as well as being able to pick up speed as they come down the street, sort of like a straightaway.
So help me, where are the stop signs going, which circle?
both of these. We have two different intersections.
Oh, you want
So
two
one-
places?
So
would be
one's
a
a one-way,
three-way.
and you want to turn it into a three-way?
Three-way and a
Yeah,
four-way.
so this one we'd want, this one right here has a stop sign here and a stop sign here. We're asking to finish it into a full
So that's a
four-way.
two-way you want to become a four-way?
Yep,
And the
and
other's
this-
a one-way you want to become a three-way? Is that what I understand? Okay, thank you.
So the
Yep.
stop signs are on the roads that are approaching up to, what is that, Grand Cheval
Grand Cheval Parkway? Yeah.
Yep, this is all Grand Cheval Parkway.
It kind of loops throughout the whole.
Yep, it
So-
does.
So where is the construction traffic coming from?
They're still completing houses over here. This is the Victoria, so anything over here is Victoria. And they're still completing houses over there, but
Oh, it's
honestly,
the evil neighbors.
It's Victoria people.
I won't say that. We love our neighbors.
So do you think, is the problem more than just construction traffic, which will go away? I assume it's kind of an ongoing.
It's
just-
more than construction
okay.
traffic. It's, I mean, if we're honest, it's the postman, it's the delivery Amazon trucks, you know, I'm guilty of ordering from them. The pizza guys, it's our neighbors.
Sure.
You know, and I think on that one straightaway, we have like 5 of those little neon guys that are up in the middle of the street
Oh,
saying,
yep.
slow down, and people might as well just, they're not there, you know, so.
Yeah.
And it gives us all anxiety, and we don't really want there to be an injury before people pay attention to it, so.
In fact, this is in Ward 2, and so I spend a fair amount of time going through here, and I see what you mean.
Yep.
They do move through at a good clip.
What's staff's recommendation?
Well, so what we've done to date, we've had Matt Clark, our city engineer, take a look. I think Brian Jung has, and we've also had some patrol monitoring for a speed perspective. We did not find an issue with speed. Now, granted, I know 30 miles an hour sometimes can feel faster than that, but we didn't
Especially
find.
a truck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't find an issue with speed. It doesn't meet our current warrants for stop signs, primarily because it'd be stopping traffic on that through street that's going through. So a good example where we've seen this before is Schoolmaster Drive, just to the south of where your old house was.
Okay, yep.
We had received a request, probably about 5-6 years ago, to put a stop sign in a very similar situation like this. And with the primary objective of trying to slow down speeds as we go down there. The one thing that we caution from a technical perspective is that stop signs don't affect speed. What we see end up happening is a couple things. If stop signs are put in places where they don't feel like they should be from a driver's perspective, that people may miss them, and pedestrians might become, cross the street assuming that somebody's going to stop because there's a stoplight, but if,
Because that was one of my thoughts, when you put them in, when you put a lot of stop signs in residential, people assume that the car's gonna stop, but then if it's not, you don't expect one there, that's when sometimes more stuff happens. It's worse.
Well, to be fair, this isn't really a street that a bunch of people that don't live in the neighborhood are going up and down, so you would assume that they would start seeing the stop signs and knowing that they're there, and we certainly let them know. I sit on the board for our association.
Have you had these conversations with your association board? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times like this, because this really isn't a cut-through, but if you got construction, because it's really, like I said, sometimes when you have a cut-through street to somewhere, but there's nowhere to cut through there. So most of the traffic is your neighbors. And if you have an association, 'cause we had the similar situation come up behind the community center, the same concerns, and I had a long conversation with that person, and I said, have you thought about talking to your neighbors and saying, hey, we are creating our own problems here? Because stop signs, the other thing that happens is local people that live there have a tendency to pull up and see nothing and go. So they really kind of start ignoring them. So that's why I always worry about adding stop signs if staff went out and did their recommendations and doesn't feel that it warrants it. So, I mean, that's Mark's opinion.
We've been discussing it in our city or in our neighborhood for about 18 months now. And I can honestly say it's kind of a divided neighborhood. We don't all interact all the time. We have 5 different association boards. So it's not like we're all, I mean, we're friends, but we're not
Right.
like interacting all the time. So they don't necessarily listen. And I guess my response to that would be, what does it hurt?
Well, I think that's what we're saying, though, is that it can cause issues. It can cause issues where people have a false expectation that somebody's going to stop, and they don't. Because if you look at where street signs are put in very deliberate places, because psychologically, that's where people expect to see them when they're driving. And so if people expect to see them, they look for them, and they're more likely to stop. But if they end up being in places where people don't expect them, they can cause issues where people will, either roll through them because they think something's not happening, or they just go through them because they're not expecting them to be there. And so I think the harm ends up being is, do you create a situation where a pedestrian feels like there's a false sense of security?
I don't think anyone on our street will ever feel that way, considering the way that people have been driving around there and the way that we've been training our children. But to me, if we have a higher chance that someone's going to stop when a child is crossing the street, it makes way more sense than not having anything there at all. I mean, we teach our children to always make eye contact with someone when you're at a stop sign. They don't always listen to that, but at least we have a higher chance that that vehicle is going to stop.
Is it a specific direction? Is it typically northbound versus southbound traffic? I mean, I guess what would stop us then preventing us, or why shouldn't we then put a stop sign at every intersection along the way there then?
These are really, I mean, you already have stop signs. You have a stop sign here where it makes sense. And here, I mean, sometimes people just stop here because it looks like an end at this one. We actually see people stop at that top intersection pretty often because it's a 4-way, just because it looks like it should be a stop sign. But it's from both directions. I mean, people are coming here off of 86th Street and they're zooming right in, and then people are coming here up around that curve. I mean, even if you were going 20 miles around that curve, it feels fast when you're coming right where there's a path to cross the street. There's literally a little sidewalk right here.
I mean, would it be more of a consideration of having a reduced speed on that road?
We really can't do a reduced speed because we're restricted to the 30-mile limit with roads from state statute.
We already tried to go down that path.
Yeah, that's, because we've
Because
had
it
that.
doesn't seem so much that stop signs an issue, it's the speed that's an issue.
The problem even, I mean, one other.
Again, it comes back
Yeah.
to the people that live in the neighborhood and not considering.
Well, and like I said, we did have, not you in particular, but we did have officer actually do speed compliance. So it's not that they're going over.
So it's not excessive speed
It's not
over the
excessive
limit.
speed.
Okay.
The issue ends up being, as a residential area,
Right,
sometimes
but it's
30
not
miles can
excessive,
about.
it's not
Feels
excessive
fast,
speed to
yeah.
30.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But-
It's excessive to the condition or the
At
children
30,
or whatever.
It seems to be
Yeah.
considered a threat here in this situation, and so, I don't know.
I mean, it's
Consider
caused
that.
some animosity between neighbors because people will speed through and we're yelling at them because,
And you know who they are when they drive by?
not personally.
No? Okay.
I mean, we recognize cars for sure when they go through, but we literally sometimes will just sit on our front porch and just yell at cars when they drive by, and that's not what we want to spend our evenings doing. And you kind of want to be able to relax a little bit when your kids are playing outside. That's why we bought in the neighborhood.
My street's exactly the same way, and I've had the same concern since I moved in. I have 2 blind corners coming to
Yeah.
where my corner is, and I actually see people roll the stop signs that are there, but it's a drag strip from the time they come off of Engler. It might dead end at the back, but, they're
Everyone's in a
cooking when they're
hurry.
going through.
To get somewhere.
And we had 2 serious accidents at that corner, too. One flipped a car up on its roof. If it's 30, they weren't doing 30. And another was a drunk that came home. He lived in the back and hit a car head-on and spun it around like a few times. And had there been a kid right there, it would have killed him.
Yeah.
So I'm very concerned, too, about similar situations like that.
Yeah, we just
but-
have so many kids in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So the good news is the construction traffic will go away. The bad news is those kids will grow up and become teenage drivers, and then you'll have speeding cars
Well,
again with
I
the next
mean,
batch of
and it's the
children.
adults that are driving worse, than anyone.
Yeah. It's, I've watched who's behind the wheel, and some of the ones I watch that zoom by really fast. If they see me, they slow down. And I have the green people I put out, little
Oh,
green
yeah,
guys.
I mean, I got one like just
Yeah.
bungeed to my tree out front. He never goes inside.
I had
so.
2 of them, and trying to use that, and that didn't work very long. So I'll put them out every other year, just so they look like they're new.
I
So
should
we
paint
get
'em.
used to them.
But yeah, anyone who's worked with me from the city so far, because I've been talking about this for a while now, I'm gonna be a squeaky wheel until something happens with it, because we're worried about our kids.
I'll take a drive through and look too, so.
It seems to be when it's a long stretch, that's
It
where
really
the
is.
problems become
Yep.
in the middle. By the time they gain speed, coming from either end,
Yeah,
they're
and
picking
Becky
up
lives
speed.
across the street from
You
me,
said
we're right in the
Speed isn't an
middle.
issue, so we gotta be careful.
Yeah,
Because they've already had officers there, speed is, it's a perception of the speed.
30
So we
is too
have to be
fast, yeah.
a little careful how we're seeing that.
And in on our street, it's both perception of the speed, but it's also speeding.
So one thing with the process here is, so there's sort of a 2-step process. The one step is to go through a staff process where we go out and check it and we look at how it meets our warrants and policy that we have in place. Then we make a determination. And so in this case, we made a determination. If somebody doesn't agree, then then the appeal process then would be to come to council. And if it's something that you guys want us to bring this back for a future discussion, then we would bring back information, both gathering from the residents who are petitioning, and then obviously what we've looked at from a staff perspective, talk about why it is that we made the recommendation we did. And at the end of the day, obviously it's council's decision where you guys want to put stop signs. But these are requests that we get from time to time around the city, and what we try to do is try to be as consistent as possible, and then also, based on what, common practices are in engineering standards.
we do have a petition that we did. We had 82 signatures as of today from the neighborhood, from just we only opened it up to the pictured area.
And none of those people are the ones you're yelling at as they're coming through.
I can't guarantee that. But maybe they want more rules, who knows?
Well, do you have that petition?
Yep, I actually shared it with Matt. It's an online petition. I can
Oh,
share it,
okay.
I can send it over again.
I mean, I don't need, I just wanted to know that we got
I
it.
gave it to Matt Clark.
Yeah,
Okay.
Matt Clark, yes.
Yeah.
Yep. We have way too
We
many
got
Matts
too
here.
many
I know.
Matts.
Yeah.
And I have 4 in my family, so it's
There you
really
go.
confusing when we say Matt. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it here and say, first off, we can't act under visitor presentation.
Correct.
All we could do then is request that we bring it forward at a later date, to do something, or,
Staff look at it or whatever.
or,
yeah.
well, staff has already done
Yeah.
that, so we're at that point
Right.
already.
But we'd give a much more in-depth analysis. I mean, I'm just giving a cursory overview.
Right.
Go ahead
What,
and take
just
that
with the
next step.
speed study, what does,
Be my recommendation, go ahead and take the next step. Let's take it a little more, look at it a little more in depth and move forward from there, make a decision.
and when you're doing a speed study, what does that entail?
It involves having an officer out on the site to do it. In this particular case, I think, can't remember if Nate or Matt mentioned it to me, that I think residents were actually in the police car with the,
Yeah, we love Tony.
yeah, so Officer Jorstad was out there, and I think people actually sat in the car and actually got to use their radar gun and do a traffic
Could they
survey
see
with
him from where you were sitting? Could the car
I
see
mean,
him?
probably, yeah. He was sitting right across from my house, which is right where this dot is. So, yeah, he was sitting right on the street there. So, I mean, and I just emailed him the other day to ask if he could come over later in the evening between 8 and 9, because people speed a little bit more around then too, but.
And we can take recommendations as far as when the, Work
Yeah, that
times
was
are
the other
and
thing
stuff
is when is it, because when you say construction track, does that mean that it's at 7?
7 to
In
5
the
or
morning,
whatever.
and then at 5 o'clock at night?
I would say 25% of it is construction traffic. I would say most of it is delivery trucks and people in the neighborhood.
Is the south one more problematic because of the curve of Grand Cheval Parkway? whereas the north one is a little more of a straightaway, or not
They
necessarily?
both have their own problems. The curve definitely causes some issues just because people kind of boomerang up around that curve.
Okay. And you don't have
And
the
there's like a
sight line.
sidewalk set right here, so kids might start crossing it,
Okay.
and a car would come around really fast.
So there's not sidewalks on both sides, so it crosses there? Is that what you're saying when you say a little
The
sidewalk there?
sidewalk ends, I think, right around here, and so most people are crossing, if you're coming down Zobella Way, you might cross right here to get to the other side of the street, because the sidewalk continues down to the park there.
Is it a marked crosswalk?
No, it's just an implied crosswalk.
Okay.
And then up here, it's really just people turning in off of 86th Street, and this is the perfect amount of space for them to really get
Accelerate up.
excited about their speed. So,
Very well put.
yeah, and the special needs kids I mentioned earlier, she asked me to mention that they live right here, and they're always crossing over this intersection. And she's been in touch with the city with no response.
She's gonna what?
Been in touch with the city asking for special needs signage and has had no response.
Our city or Victoria?
Your city, Chaska.
So,
She lives in Chaska.
no, but what kind of signs is she looking for?
But
Special
there's a
needs
special needs
children.
children in the neighborhood kind of a deal.
Do we do that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Do we put up signs for special needs?
Like a, deaf child, kind of different signage you'll
I
see.
think we can. I can't, I'm trying to think of where
Know that I've
we
seen
have. I
them.
don't know that we
I
have
mean,
before.
is it,
I've
would
seen
it
them in other
be that-
communities.
what would that sign, in your mind, what would that sign?
I'm just passing along the message.
No, and, okay, and that's fine, because I'm trying to understand, is it a deaf child, or,
I believe they have social disabilities,
'cause
so
I'm just wondering how you would mark that,
I'm not really sure.
yeah.
I'm sure there's already signs out there in existence you could
Yeah.
find examples of.
Yeah.
I've seen
even
them
seen
before.
ones that
I was just trying to get.
Deaf child in
I've
this
seen deaf
neighborhood.
child,
Yeah, I've seen that
but
one.
I wasn't sure what the
I'm trying to think, I
disability
think the
was.
only place that we actually have one is Bender Court.
Yes, and that's been there when I worked here back in
Yeah,
1970s.
it's been here as long as I've been in town,
And I
so.
don't even know if anybody's still, that's the problem with some of that, you don't know if they move out, and then you have that there, it's kind of like the
Well, if it makes
cars that
people
have
slow
baby on
down, I'm
board
happy
and
to
they
leave it
sell
there
them.
forever.
What's that?
That if it makes people slow down, then I'm happy to leave it there for as long as it needs to be.
Problem is, I don't know if it does, you know. Well,
So I would suggest that we just have Matt bring something back to us on this and
Yep,
move from there.
that's fine.
If everyone else is good with that.
Yep.
I'm not always good with it, but I'll listen. I, you know,
Always listen to
I-
full sites, full stories.
right.
Yep.
Signs are great, but nobody reads them. I mean, I could quiz you and say, your everyday drive home, and you'd probably fail all the signs, because we all do. I'm terrible. I've had people say, didn't you see the sign there? No, I've driven it for 10 years, and I go back and I really chase it and look for it, and it's there. And that's what scares me about
I
some
mean,
of that.
I understand where you're coming from, but honestly,
That's-
if it helps even a little bit, it helps. Because it's not okay the way it is.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for taking the
And-
courage to come see us.
And the rest of the neighborhood, there really aren't stop signs on Grand Trevelle Parkway either, are there? They kind of goes all the way through, or?
There's no other areas of the neighborhood where there's actually houses along Grand Cheval.
That's a good point, yeah. The rest of
I'm
it's
not
just
sure that it was
sub-neighborhoods off on the
supposed to
side.
be set up the way it was when the neighborhood was originally planned. I've heard that it wasn't supposed to connect to 86th Street. I don't necessarily think that that's true. But, yeah, there's no other parts of the neighborhood where there's actually houses and driveways connecting to Cheval.
That's a good point.
So,
That connecting to 86th Street was whether or not Victoria was gonna be part of that. That's kind of when that was, I think, all happening.
Well, we're in an interesting spot regardless. I mean, sitting on the HOA, we have some interesting discussions about
I'm sure.
all
sure
sorts
you
of
do.
things.
I'll bet.
So, yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yep.
All right, is there anyone else here under visitor presentation? You guys are all together? Okay. Have a good night, thanks. All right, We will move on. Item 6, approving previous meeting minutes. Changes or discussion, if not, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Councilmember Geisler,
I'll second that.
second by Councilmember Bo to approve the previous.
The only point I would ask is, Matt, as I was looking through some of the minutes, a lot of them it'll say motion carried. And we really maybe should say each time if it was 5-0, 4-1, 3-2 or something like that.
5-0,
Yeah,
whatever.
yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
Oh,
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
aye.
Aye. Both same sign. Motion carries, moves us to 7, consent agenda. And for anyone here that doesn't consent, are items that need approval, but not necessarily discussion, but can be discussed if anyone has a question. I'll pose it to you. Questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve consent items.
Motion by Councilmember Schultz.
I'll second that.
Go ahead.
Second by Councilmember Bo to approve consent agenda. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moves us to item 8. Accept the final 2018 pay classification study results and approve implementation.
Mayor and Councilmember, the item in front of you tonight is actually a long time in the making. So we just went through the process of completing, updating our compensation and classification plan for all of our salaries. We did this primarily for 2 reasons. First of all, because it had been a number of years since we had actually completed a formal update to our compensation plan. And second reason is we have requirements under the state for our pay equity compliance to make sure that we're staying on top of making sure that our pay classifications standards not only meet our objectives as a city, but also meet all the statutory requirements from the state for pay equity. So we went through the process, actually brought on a consultant, MRA, to complete the compensation study, and really went through a pretty in-depth process to actually get this completed. If anybody has ever been through a pay classification process at your work, you'll know how absolutely fun and enjoyable it is. It's a tough process, and I give a lot of credit to our human resource staff for all the work that they put into this, because it really is in-depth, starting with job descriptions, making sure that job descriptions match up with what the actual positions are doing, that there's consensus with department heads and employees about what that is, doing a job and compensation points analysis to be able to determine where people rank in a pay classification plan, to make sure that at the end of the day, what you're trying to make sure is that both female and male positions are not getting unfairly compensated based on gender. We also do a market analysis to make sure that we're really sort of in the ballpark for where our compensation ranges should be. And all that then is put together into a pay classification plan, which you have attached onto your sheet. That basically what it does is it sets the pay ranges for positions. So it's not like there's one pay. It really says here's where a person would come in to the city, and here's where their pay range can actually go to. This is the same pay classification plan that each year when we go through the adjustments to our pay plan. So if we saw a 2% or a 3% adjustment, we actually adjust up those pay classification plans to make sure that they're staying current with where we're at in our system, and then also making sure that we stay current with that plan. And where that becomes important is, for instance, if we have a position that's vacant and we're going out and hiring a new position, making sure that the job description is actually matching up with exactly what we're looking for, so that we're rating them comparably within that pay classification plan. So it's a living, breathing document. It's something that's that we need to maintain over time, but we need to have a base to start with. The good news is that let's see, we had close to 80% of the positions within the city were actually found to be not only in our pay classification, fit where they should have within the classification plan, but also fit within the market that's out there, which I think is great news. But we did have about 20% then that fell outside of those ranges, and then we had to develop strategies for how to be able to get people back into those ranges and have a plan to get them back into it while also being fair with them as we did that. So it ended up being that Nate probably knows the exact number, but I think we had 5 or 6 positions that their positions ended up falling below the actual minimum wage within the range. So the only immediate action we'll have to take is to get those, their actual pays up to the base of that minimum. But then the rest basically fit within that system that's there. So there's very little immediate action that we need to take other than getting those people who are below the base up to the minimum of the base for that. And then, the way it's structured now is we have it structured around what our current pay for performance plan is. But one of the things we're also doing as we finish this up is looking at our performance review system and looking at ways in which we could enhance that in a way that we're getting the maximum benefit out of it. So really looking at how do we make it as good a tool as possible to provide feedback to employees, but also tie that to, look at how we actually tie that to our compensation plan. It's a big discussion in the human resources world beyond just Chaska now about pay for performance and how those systems work. And there's different philosophies that are out there, and we're just going to go down that road of looking at what do we think makes sense for the city to look at as we go forward. But at this point, it's really just the base pay classification plan and getting this updated plan approved and being able to move forward, and then having the maintenance system in place so that as positions change, we're making sure that they fit into this system that we've created. So I can certainly answer any questions that you might have. But staff is recommending adoption of the 2018 compensation study. Huge thank you to basically everyone within the organization, because this touched absolutely every position in the city, and especially our HR staff. Sarah and Stephanie have been troopers going through this, and they probably want to pull their hair out, but they've done a really good job getting this in place. This is something that was long overdue for us to get updated.
I'm going to add our payroll clerk to that thing.
Oh, yes, Whitney to our payroll clerk, yeah. I don't want to forget people here.
When was the last time we did one of these?
1986.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was done.
What are you giggling about?
So
No, that's not to say that we haven't done any maintenance on it since. I mean, we've done maintenance over the years and stuff, and I think it shows that.
Well, apparently we've been doing something.
Apparently, we've been doing a pretty good job of maintaining it, because 80% of the positions fell in. But it's so it's not that no maintenance had been done on it, but we really want to use this as a springboard to make sure that we have a set in place process for how to deal with this going forward, so that it's not 80%, it's 100% that we know that we're meeting as we go forward.
I think, Matt was talking about updating our pay for performance system. That really gets to performance reviews and making sure that we've got consistent approach across the organization on how we're doing that. So that's the next step that we'll work towards. But as a part of that performance review, I think one thing that we'll look at, in addition to just giving employees feedback and having that discussion, is sitting down and taking a look at your job description and seeing if your role has changed over the past year significantly enough that that needs to be reviewed. So there's opportunities that we can build in, to just how we conduct our business that will allow us to continue to make sure that we're staying on top of this system as well.
Plus, it's pretty difficult to do a review if you don't have a proper job description to
Right.
review them against.
Yep.
As to whether they are doing their job or not doing it. And also, with so many long-term employees, doesn't that sort of feed into some people start falling behind on the pay because as you know, they've been here such a long time, the rate they were hired under with their raises doesn't quite catch up to what the market is. So you have new people come on board that are making more than the people who've been here 15 years, you
Yeah,
know?
that's
So-
that's always an issue that you run
Yeah.
into, but that's, but yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of issues that you can run into, with a pay classification plan that's not up to date.
Yeah, and we do have, at least here, what I've seen, more long-term employees than I've seen anywhere,
Yep.
which means they love the jobs, but it can create a problem, I can see that.
Yep. I feel really good about what's being put down here, and it took a long time to get to this point, no doubt. But this is a very in-depth study that takes a lot of manpower to get completed. It's one of those that when you start off a process like this, you don't realize how much time it takes till you actually do it, so.
Is there budgetary effects? I mean,
Not
you kinda-
huge.
You kind of said it wasn't
Yeah,
really that
I
many.
think it ended up being over the course of the entire organization, I think it was between $10,000 and $15,000 for the entire
Wow.
organization, which is
That's
pretty,
not much at all.
pretty minimal.
There,
Yeah, so,
Excellent.
again, I think that goes back to say, there was, what we were doing in the past probably was right, but we want to be more deliberate about it.
Sure.
So we're able to cover the
Yeah.
budgetary piece
Yep.
of it?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, my opinion, you know, that we haven't had official one done that long, that it certainly is apparently long overdue. We're fortunate that even though we really didn't have an HR department until the last couple of years, someone's been keeping good track of things, so that's kudos, because I believe that was you two in different roles at one point or another.
I remember those days.
That's why I said that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's 32 years since it's been on.
And one of the biggest challenges for an organization is to not only attract but retain quality people. And this is a part of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now there's no guessing, because now there's an actual document to go off.
Well, yeah, and that's, at the end of the day, I mean, your gut can tell you certain directions, but it's a lot better to have it down, here's exactly what your
Right.
job description is and how it relates to this pay plan.
Good.
You know, I'm pleased, given the amount of years that have gone since we've done this, how close we were. And there's a very little financial impact to implement this. That's a good sign.
That's the good news.
Okay. Any further discussion? We're open to it if you want. If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the 2018 compensation study results and approve implementation.
So motion by Councilmember Geisler,
Second.
second by Councilmember Schultz, again accepting the final 2018 pay classification study and approve the implementation of that. Discussion.
So are we implementing kind of the way the study came back, or have we made any adjustments on our own with observations we've made inside, or?
Well, yeah, so it goes through sort of an iterative process. So you get back drafts, and then people start pointing out what you haven't thought of before. So it goes through iterative drafts till you get to a point where you feel comfortable from department head, employee, administration, that we have got it to a point where we feel like everybody's sort of speaking the same language.
Okay.
All right, I got a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Oh, sorry.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries. Moves us on to item 8B, presentation of community survey results.
So this is the fun stuff. This is what we've been waiting for forever. So we have Peter Leatherman from, I'm just still gonna call you Decision Resources.
It was only 5 years ago.
Okay, it was only 5 years ago, but Peter, we've been working with him and his partner for what?
Not quite 32 years. I
Yeah.
looked at it, 1991, I have a data point on this presentation.
Yes.
So that's about the last time we had a,
That's why I chuckled, Mr. Mayor.
never mind.
So, so the Morris Leatherman company, used to be Decision Resources, has been doing community surveys for us about once every 5 years for the last 32 years. And the great thing about these guys is that they not only have data points that they can compare going back in time for some pretty key areas, but they also, they're a statistically significant survey, so we can feel good that the information that's being presented is something that is not just people randomly responding on a web page, but something that there's a pretty in-depth conversation that goes into it. And also, they do surveys for a lot of the other municipalities across the metropolitan area and also the school districts. So you've done the last few surveys for the school district for the referendums.
For Eastern Carver, yeah.
Yep.
Probably the last 25 years with Eastern Carver, too.
Yep.
Yep.
So they have a really good knowledge of Chaska, our school district, our area, and you'll find that Peter's really able to sort of weave a story with what information we have. So just say sit back and relax, and the information that we get tonight is going to be stuff that we spend a pretty considerable amount of time over the next few months really doing more of a deep dive from a communication standpoint into different topic areas. And so we'll be working with Kevin Wright to basically pick some real key topic areas that are coming out of this and dive deeper into what is it saying, but also what does it potentially mean for us as we're going into the future too. Over to
So,
Peter.
so before you start,
Yes.
so I've been around this community for a couple of years. I have never heard anyone tell me they were contacted and did this. How many people do you contact a year?
We'll just start with methodology right up front. We talked with 400 randomly selected residents across the
Okay.
city. Every once in a while, I was at a school district 2 weeks ago where the school board chair had been called. And sometimes when an elected official is called, they say, oh, well, I don't want to participate. No, you're a citizen of the community. You're part of a residential sample. But we always talk with 400 randomly selected residents. We do it via telephone. And everybody wants to know about cell phones. They're included in the sample. This time around in the city, 43% of the households indicated that they were cell phone only households. You had 11% that were landline only. It's a very specific demographic on that, and then the remainder had both landline and cell phone. So at this point in Chaska, it's almost a 50-50 split between households with cell phone, being cell phone only households, and then landline households. So that's the 400. 400 gives us plus or minus 5%, and it's a cost benefit for the city. 400, to get to a plus or minus 4%, you have to talk to 625 people, which increases the cost by 50%, and it's not worth it for the additional percentage points. So for most public bodies that we work with, we do the 400 sample. That way also we can look at differences in demographics, homeowners versus renters, households with children, those sorts of demographic breaks. The survey was conducted towards the end of May and the first part of June. It is a longer survey, not the longest that we've ever done, but the average time on the phone for this survey was 33 minutes. Huh. People spend time. We had 12% on the phone with us for over an hour. That was by their own choice. A lot of historians out there, we call them. What's that?
No, I was giving him a high five on it.
Now, I will say, Fred, any questions on the methodology at all? I'm surprised you haven't run into anybody who's been.
Like I said,
They actually called our house this year.
no.
So,
I think I've heard it 2 people over
I have,
time.
I mean,
First time I've
somewhere
ever had
along the line, somebody would come up to you and say, hey, I got this phone call from
Yeah.
but I have never, ever heard anyone say that they were surveyed.
The best way to mitigate it for the city to be inundated with who are these people, why are they calling me, is this legitimate, is to do an upfront communications push out there, which, working with Kevin, he did, in putting out the press release saying we've been hired by the city of Chaska has hired the Morris Leatherman Company. So when caller ID comes up, and as much as Morris Leatherman fits on caller ID or on cell phones, you don't get caller ID, you get the number, we leave a message introducing ourselves, and then they're willing to pick it up the next time.
So that brings up a good question. What % answer and participate versus don't?
The overall non-response rate on this was 5.5%. Once we found them at home, and this is not a survey that you sit and say, okay, you have to take it right now or never.
Yeah.
When you have a survey of this length, you make it convenient for the person taking the survey. So over half the calls were done by appointment.
Okay.
When is it convenient for you,
Interesting.
not when it's convenient for my phoners.
Yep.
And that's just how you have to do it when you're doing this sort of
Sure.
survey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good to know. I don't know that I've ever had all this explained, how you go about doing it, so thank you for that.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. And I'll say up front as we get into the results, and I sat and met with Matt and Nate before, and in writing up the summary and just reviewing again to present, what the city has managed to do over the last 6 years is really thread the needle on something that's really difficult as you manage growth and still maintain a small town feel. It really is amazing some of the results we're going to see and how well it's done even at a period of rapid growth. And up front, one of the first questions we ask in a survey, and we do these general questions because we haven't talked about anything. We haven't talked about taxes or anything like that. We want to get their opinion up front. How would they rate the quality of life in the community? Now, the overall, when you add the excellent and the good, in most communities, it's over 90%. People aren't going to stay in a community they think is only fair or poor for very long. They're going to look for a different community. This time around, it's 98%. What is different and what's bounced back from 2012 is the excellent rating is up 18 points. And that's what differentiates communities. If everybody's between 90 and 95% favorable, the difference between the excellent rating is between 6% all the way up to 68%. Minnesotans are very difficult graders. They don't get enthusiastic about a lot of things. And so that's where we really monitor the excellent rating, because it goes beyond just saying something's good. You're saying it's excellent here. It's bounced back up to what it was in 2000 and 2005 and the 18-point jump from 2012. But the history, as we go back into 1991, you can see that the 98% combined is the high going back for 27 years. The 56% is the second highest, only 62% positive or excellent in 2000. So it is the trend in the right direction, absolutely, and it's kind of stabilized. That 56% places the city of Chaska over the past 3 years, as Matt indicated. We work with a lot of municipalities across the metro area, and those that we don't, we do a spring and a fall metro survey to kind of have overall results, because we have the luxury here, obviously, with the history to see how the city compares historically, but also it's the comparatives. Where are cities currently? You're among the top 5 communities with the 56%. Sometimes city managers ask, can we see all the labels and everything like that? And we did it a long time ago, and some of the cities at the bottom were very unhappy. But you're in the top 5, that 56% enthusiasm.
You keep on asking the question every time.
You'll get the answer. Now, when they're evaluating the quality of life, this question captures what they're thinking. What do they like most about the community? And you can see the attributes. This is open-ended. They tell us what they like, and we collapse them down into categories. It's small town values is what they're resonating to at the top of the mind. From what leads the list, the small town feel at 19%, the connection, the friendly people, 17%, quiet and peaceful, open space nature, safe. You finally get a suburban response of housing and neighborhood at 8%. But those top 6 account for a majority of what residents value in the community. It really is the small town values is what they're ascribing and rating that quality of life at 56% excellent. Now, if we ask what the, like most, we should follow up with what's the most serious issue facing the community. Now, the good news is there's nothing that we classify as a major concern. The bad news is there's lots of concerns, but nothing rising to a threshold in an open-ended response. We typically set the threshold at 20%. When 1 in 5 in an open-ended coalesce around one response, we consider it to be a significant result at this point in time. You don't even have anything that hits double digits. And you see the first kind of discussion on pro-growth, anti-growth in the community, with too much growth leading the list, but it's only at 9%. High taxes is extraordinarily low in what we're seeing across the metro area right now. Over the past 18 months, the norm on that's been between 15 and 20%. And we're going to look at taxes more specifically a little bit later on. Then we have too much road construction, and we have the other side of the anti-growth. You're lacking businesses, and we're going to look at some specific interests on business coming in here. But you can see it's all down, and then we go with single digits. It's one of those things where you come into a city and you say, you really don't have to fix a major problem out there in the minds of the community. You're kind of like fine-tuning the FM dial on the radio for folks on a plethora of things to keep in mind. At the bottom, you have 12% that said, I'm sure I could think of anything, but not off the top of my mind. That's the unsure. And 12% said absolutely nothing. It's utopia in the city of Chaska. That's about 50% higher. Norm on that is 8%. So 1 in 8 are what we would classify as boosters in the community. They see no problems. And they obviously then, throughout the survey, rate the city very highly, from the governance to the communication to spending policy. The general direction the city is headed. Now, this is the high since 2000, and it's the high that we have in the metro area over the past 18 months. 94% said the city is going in the right direction. Only 5% said it's off on the wrong track. Just an extraordinary result. And you can see you kind of were at that 80% level since 2000, and now all of a sudden up to 94%. Very strong endorsement of the direction that the city's moving. What about their feelings about the city? Is the city of Chaska just home, or is it home, or just a place to live? You're now at the high. It's been pretty stable at about 3/4 to 80%. Now 82%, the high, say this is home. 18%, just a place to live. So there's more connection in the community, which comes in even at a stronger point on the next question. Overall, how would they rate the strength of community identity? This is an extraordinary result in the jump in the excellent rating. At a time as the city continues to grow, you have a much higher, it's gone from 18% to 46% of people saying the community identity is excellent here. 91% rating it favorably, only 10% only fair or poor. And keeping in mind those core values, community identity is important when you value the small town attributes so much. So the city not only has managed, threaded the needle on managing growth and still keeping the perception and those attributes that are so important to people of the small town. Do they feel accepted, valued, and welcomed in the city of Chaska? Absolutely. 96% yes, said yes, only 2% said no. What's the overall perception of the community? If we go back to the red bar on this, 2005, 29% said the city of Chaska was a small town, 47% said it was a suburban community. 13 years later, it's flipped. 48% view Chaska as a small town, 27% view it as a suburban community, and you've had this consistent 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people see it as both. But the perception, and that's what I'm talking about, is the expectations of a small town have not been lost as growth has continued to occur. Let's talk about taxes. We saw up front on the most serious issue facing the community, it wasn't a top-of-the-mind response like we've seen across the metro area. So what is their overall thought on what percent they think goes to the city? Your folks are very educated. I believe the exact number was 27%. And we told them that after we asked the question, because people always want to know once they tell you what the range is. 34% were between 21 and 30%, 21% were less than 20%, 22% were above 30%. So there really is a high level of information out here on what the actual percent of taxes going towards the city versus the county and the school district. So then you can say that their perception on taxes, perception on taxes doesn't necessarily always line up with the actual fact about taxes. It is a perception. But there is a good level of knowledge in the electorate, in the residents, about what their actual property taxes going to the city are. And if we look at this question now on their perception of overall property taxes, you have 31% saying they're very high or somewhat high, 56% said about average, 5% said somewhat low. We have their names and numbers. And 9% were unsure. We would classify the property tax climate in Chaska as benign. The threshold that we use to have a hostile tax climate right now is 50%, very high and somewhat high. You can see that you're at 31%. You're one of a few communities that we label as benign. What's the high on this right now? Everybody wants to know. I won't say the city. It's a northwest Hennepin suburb. 77%, very high and somewhat high. That's a very difficult property tax environment. So that's people's perception of taxes in the city. Now, how do they feel about property tax increases? Well, they're split. It depends on what it's used for. The dark gold color is, would you support a property tax increase to maintain city services? 68% say absolutely. 25% oppose that. How about, would you support a property tax increase to improve or expand city services? No, not that interested, 35 to 60%. So they are willing to invest to maintain what they have in improvement or enhancement property tax. The devil would be in the details of what it's going to be used for. Now, when the rubber hits the road, and to me this is a key question in the city survey, because we ask people to consider the taxes they pay and the quality of the services they receive, and how do they rate that value. And even if their perception of taxes are very high or somewhat high, keeping in mind you had 31% say they thought their city property taxes were very high or somewhat high. You only had 10% rate the value as only fair, and nobody said poor. So even if they thought there was a perception that their taxes were high, the services being provided by the city nets out as a positive value in their mind. You actually have the high since 2000 in the excellent rating, 1 in 5, and a total of 87% saying the value is excellent or good, extraordinarily high in comparison to the metro. And historically, it's at the high that we have on this question for you. It's gone everywhere from 68% now to 87% rating that value as a positive on the quality of the city services.
I think I started in 2006. Just saying.
Everybody likes to set their flag when they see the timeline on data.
Don't pull a muscle pat yourself on the back.
Now, the overall evaluation of city services, we've asked about it broadly as they look at the comparison with taxes and the services. Individually, now, I won't go through this entire list, but what we want to see is a sea of blue instead of a red riptide, and that's precisely what we see. Now, the percents don't add up to 100% because some people are saying, I don't have enough information. Upkeep and maintenance on the PAR 30, 30% haven't used it or haven't talked to anybody who's used it and doesn't have any opinion on it. So that's why it doesn't add to 100%. The overall aggregate, if we normalize this, take out the uncertainty and look at the positive to the negative, is just under 84% positive across this list, which places the city among the top 5 as an aggregate city service rating score. One thing I will point out, because everybody always looks to see what's the longest red bar, okay? Your longest red bar is the longest red bar in every city, street repair and maintenance. Now, the 73 to 27 is your lowest rated. But currently across the metro area, the norm on this is 60% favorable to 40% unfavorable. So you are better than the norm by 13 points on a key city service of street repair and maintenance.
But it's interesting that we've actually internally ranked that as one of our areas that need improvement. I mean, that's why we put so much money into street reconstruction.
It validates that decision, yes. Now, the overall city service priorities, we've gone through the list again, and we've asked them, is this city service essential, very important, somewhat important, not too important, or not at all important? What I've decided to array for this is the essential and the very important. You can see, for the most part, everything was at least a majority of folks thought the service was very important. But there really is truly a clear hierarchy. It's not surprising. If you look at the top of the list, it's fire, it's police, dependability of city water, EMS, sanitary sewer, quality of city water, and electric service, 80%, with the public safety and the dependability of city water being over 90% essential. Almost a complete 100% saying it's at least very important.
I'm surprised electric is that low.
I was surprised the snow plowing was that low as well.
It's still, though, 96% of people still said it's at least very important.
point, yeah.
You know, it's just that difference between, you're really looking at nuances, and that's why I display it this way, for that essential versus very important.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, there's still the categories of somewhat or not too important that
Okay.
aren't arrayed up there. You know, and then we typically see what other cities see when they look at this. Park and Rec, on an importance priority for city services, is lower. They just have more specific constituencies, whether it's golf courses, curling, those sorts of things. But this is just to give you an idea of what people set as priorities for services. One more time through the list.
I think Luke's having some problems back there.
Funding of city services. Going through the list, and this is just as a prioritization. Where are people's minds on the use of funding? And this is where that question that we asked, just blanket to maintain or expand and enhance, this gives you, there is flexibility on what the funds would be used for, whether they're willing to see additional funds used. It's set up like a stoplight. Green, they would be willing to accept an increase. Yellow, maintain. Red, you can cut or eliminate. And there were very few people saying cut, I just collapse it, or I would say eliminate. Most of them said if you had to put cuts in. And I always tell councils and administration as they look at this, this is meant to give you priorities. And so if you look at the increase versus the cut and eliminate category, so on police service, 34% indicate that they would support an increase, only 1% cut and eliminate. So it's a plus 33 for an enhancement of police service from property taxes. Going down to, say, the quality of city water, the dependability of city water, street repair and maintenance, a plus 30 to give you that prioritization. On the flip side, though, you do see what you would expect to see with the importance of services with specific constituents, especially the golf courses and the curling. But it lines up with, if you look at their overall rating on those key services that they deem important, the fire, police, they're extraordinarily highly rated. And people a percent, about a third of the population is willing to invest more in those services. Electricity rates really has changed perception since 2000. In 2000, 41% thought the electricity rates in the city were very high or somewhat high. Only 42% said about average. It's now come back to what it was in 2012 again. 23% said they were high, 66% about average, 7% low. Their concern on electricity rates has mitigated quite a bit since 2000. And once again, being classification, it's a benign environment on the perception of electricity rates. The key question as you grow is, do they feel that the quality of city services have kept pace with the growth? Absolutely. 92% indicate yes, it has. Only 7% said no, it's not. Oh, a topic that's a survey stopper.
Wow. Holy moly.
Yeah.
The importance of choosing your garbage hauler.
It's odd.
Almost even.
48% think it's a constitutional right.
How we can fill the place.
It's either very important or somewhat important to be able to choose your garbage hauler. 48% don't think it is. The community's divided on the importance of the ability to choose. It's not surprising.
amazing?
We see this in
Why
community
we can
after
fill the place
community.
when we talk about
Anywhere between 50 to 60% in any community believe it is
You're never
their
gonna
right to be
satisfy
able to
everyone.
choose their garbage hauler. Now, what we do have is we're one of a few cities that actually hit 50% saying that they would support organized garbage collection.
Surprised about that.
Now, it is not something, though, a policy issue, I always tell clients, you look at the intense groups, those strongly favored and those strongly opposed, they're about equal, 23%, 19%. You have 15% unsure. So it's a policy that I would say perhaps is not ripe in light of the previous slide where half the community believes that it's important to choose your hauler, half believe it is not important to choose your hauler. It is growing. The norm on this right now, it started, we asked this question, this issue started coming up 12, 15 years ago. It was about 35% support, 60% opposed. It's now about 40 to 45% support to about 40, 45% opposed. So you are one of a few with a flat majority. Well, it's not a majority, it's 50%. We have 50% plus one. There's a flat majority. So it's not ripe at this point in time. And part of it is, and what has changed this going back through the years when it was 2-1 against, is the discussion, and we go through the list and we ask, do you believe that garbage collection in an open system or organized system, is the cost for street repair better? 67% believe it's better in an organized collection system. Pollution from trucks, 74% believe it's better in an organized collection. But on the other side, you have not only the right to choose your hauler, but the perception still tips. It's narrower, but people still believe on cost and customer service, it's better in an open system. So the issue perhaps is gaining traction, but it's not at this point ripe.
Part of it is they don't know what they don't know either.
That's right.
That is absolutely it.
Anything, and
The interesting thing I found about this, though, is that people know that the streets take more of a beating and that there's more pollution, but they still said they didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
because they want to
They'd rather
control
pay
the
for
cost.
it.
Yeah.
They feel they can do a better cost
But they'll
than what the
get,
city would be.
they'll get a
Yeah.
better cost if it's organized.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's bid every, whatever your,
But it's perception, and that's what the
Yeah.
perception is currently.
And there are, in every community, there's typically between 20 and 30% of people, they have personal relationships with their garbage haulers. I mean, Christmas cards, those sorts of things. And they worry that, it's a different question if you're gonna choose their hauler. If you go organized and you choose the hauler that they have, then they might be willing to have a discussion. But there's a quarter of people out there that
And I think that's getting less and less. I think there was a time we had, we had very local haulers that everybody knew by name, and that was, but now they're all being bought out by the big boys. and
Exactly.
There's hardly any small locals left.
Yep.
There's a few, but not many.
Yep.
That is an interesting couple
Yeah.
of slides there, though. That's
Worse
pretty-
for everything, but
pretty
I'm not
wild.
gonna do it.
I don't want to be,
fact that
I don't
it
want my
was just
road
so
replaced. but
Especially
I don't care if it gets
67% on the
like
cost of
my
road
garbage
repair.
hauler.
They realize it,
amazing.
they know it, but don't
amazing.
do it.
It doesn't outweigh.
And I would tell you that I'd rather, as far as customer service, if I had to call the city, which would, if we went that type of way, you would get a better customer service than you
Absolutely.
would calling
The hauler.
a big hauler.
Yeah.
I won't say a name like something,
Don't say it.
Yep.
but
One of the big guys.
Must have two names. Something.
Excellent.
how about them twins?
Moving right along.
Let's switch to public safety. Perception over the past 2 years on crime, 72% think it's remained about the same. 22% say it's increased, 4% say it's decreased. Once again, like property taxes, crime is a perception. Whether the crime statistics bear that out. Oftentimes, the city will see this result and say, this doesn't accurately reflect what's happening in the community. And then it's a communication, because crime can be localized even if it's outside your borders, and it comes in. But 3/4 think crime has remained about the same. Do they feel safe in Chaska? Absolutely. 97-3. 18% indicate they've been victim of a crime during the past year. That's the norm across the metro. It really doesn't matter. Once you get to the second ring suburbs, obviously when we're talking with Minneapolis and St. Paul or first ring suburbs, the norm is higher, about 25 to 30%, but you get second ring and out, it's typically somewhere between 15 and 20%, indicating that they've been victim of a crime. Governance and administration. You're at the high now over the last 16 years on another very important question, and that's people having the ability to have a say, empowerment. The question is asked, other than voting, do you feel you can have a say about the way the city of Chaska runs things? If you go back to 2000, 49% said yes, 40% said no. Now, 71% say yes, 26% say no. The norm on this right now is 60% yes, 35% no. There's been a change now over the years in people confusing the ability to have a say versus have their way. And it has clouded their opinion on this question and driven down the amount of people saying, yes, I feel I can have a say. But at a time that that's happening, it hasn't happened here. That you're at the high since 2000, and you're 11 points higher than the norm we see across the metro area. The job of the mayor and city council.
For that one.
Well, I'm just going to go to the historic. Give you even further going back. You're at the high since 1993 of approval to disapproval. 84% approval this time to 12% disapproval. 4% were unsure. What we look at for this one, and it varies so much, and you can see where some of the variation is going to come in. If you look at the yellow bar, uncertainty varies in some communities. And the threshold that we always use, we look at ratio of a positive to negative to do a comparison. You're at 84-12, 7-1. We consider the norm on this to be 3-1, positive to negative. So the council is very well regarded, and between 2005 and 2012 is where the council rating went up. I don't know who that relates to, but
Alex, you getting this one?
now,
Do you want him to look up names for the article?
now, should the mayor's term be changed from 2 years to 4 years? The city you have a
Interesting.
majority support. It hasn't really changed since 2012. It was 56% in 2012 to 27% opposed, 54% support. This time around to 30%. On a policy issue, it's about 2-to-1, strong favor versus strong opposition. So it hasn't really changed over time. There's still a majority that support changing the mayor's term. Now, changing to
Changing it or leaving it the same?
changing from a 2 to a 4-year term. What about changing council to an at-large
Here we
system?
go.
This is another issue that's not ripe. Especially the highest percentage is unsure. 35% want more information and to think about what it means. 34% support, 32% opposed. That chart is a pollster's nightmare. It'll give you a direction. A third, a third, a third. And if you look at intensity, 14% strongly favor, 16% strongly oppose. It's an issue that is not ripe and more discussion would have to take place to understand the pros and the cons for an at-large system versus a ward system. Job of city staff. I'll leave this up just to say, if we look at the right, 36% have had quite a lot or some firsthand contact with city staff during the past couple of years. I'm going to go to the next chart because it goes back further on the history than that chart, going back to 1991. Like the council, the city staff now is at the high in 27 years, 91-8. This, the ratio we look at, is better than 6-1. 91-8, it's better than 11-1. So both the council, the governance side, and the administration side are among the top 5 in the metro area over the past 2 years. And I think a lot of the goodwill for both entities comes from the perceptions of development. Overall, you're at the high water mark now for do they think development across the city is well-planned or not well-planned. 70%, 19% saying not well-planned, and 11% are unsure. What about the pace of development? It switched in 2005, between 2005 and 2012, and it was an interesting switch where it went from the split being between too rapid and about right being equal to basically 60% saying it's about right and the tilt being now not fast enough. You've gone from, and cities go through this as they grow, we call it phase 2 concerns on development. Okay, the development's here, people are coming. Now we're concerned about what other types of things can come in and fill in. We're going to look at some of those amenities. Those things are job-producing businesses, restaurants, and we're going to look at see some housing. But now, if there's a tip, I mean, overall, a majority of people are satisfied and say the pace of development is about right. But by about 2-to-1 of those having an opinion of it's too fast versus not fast enough, it now tips to not fast enough. And when we look at these characteristics on what they're looking for, this is set up like the city funding as a stoplight. Green, bring in more development. Red, stop, no more of the development. And yellow, you have about the right amount. You can see you have very little red on this chart. Surprisingly, on rental units, those are the highest red you have. At affordable rental units and luxury rental units and executive high-end housing. Those three at 21, 22, and 14%. But on rental units, it actually nets out. There are more people saying to bring more in than less. You have 28% saying increase the amount of affordable rental units, and you have 26% saying increase the amount of luxury rental. So it's not the negative rental units that we see across the metro area normally. Normally, that's a net negative. You have more people saying we have too many. On the flip side, what are they looking for? there's a theme in the housing on life cycle housing in the community now. And this happens, and it's a good effect of having such a high quality of life ratings. People now are concerned about where will their kids live when they move back to the community when they go off to college. And so you have 38% saying you need more starter homes. You have 38% saying more affordable housing. And that was stated in the survey as housing costing $220,000. It was given a definition of affordable housing. And people talked about that, a place for my children to live. On the other side of the life cycle housing is a concern as people downsize and get older, is there a place for them to live with assisted living and one-level senior housing? So it's kind of the life cycle. People want to stay here now. They love the quality of life, and that's the demand in the housing market at this point in time amongst residents. Then if we go to the bottom four with the business portion of the development, that's the phase two that communities go through now. A flat majority of people saying they want more, there should be more light manufacturing businesses, and that they're thinking jobs. And entertainment establishments, then service retail and restaurants, 48%. So the question of whether to grow or not to grow has been settled in the minds of most residents. The question now is how to grow and what to fill in those gaps and say fine-tune the infrastructure of the economic development across the city. Where are folks shopping? A third say their principal retail shopping area is Target and Chaska. 17% Chaska Plaza, 11% going to Shakopee, 9% Eden Prairie Mall. And this has obviously changed over time. When we started doing the surveys earlier, you didn't have the businesses here.
In 2000, the question was, people said they wanted more retail development, and the question is what kind of retail, and they didn't even say what kind, they said Target.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they were specific to say we want a Target in the community.
You build it, they will come. Yep. The local retail shopping dollar, what percent do they say is spent in the city of Chaska? This has changed a little bit. It's tipped more, and now keep in mind, this is in an environment comparing to 2012 to 2018, where there's much greater reliance on online shopping. So it's not that the competition is from outside the borders and the neighbors on what stores are available. City after city is seeing this, that the competition is either buying here or buying online. It tips a little more. You have 5% more. You have 36% total saying that they spend 50% or more of their dollar in comparison to 31% 6 years ago. What about the frequency of their purchases, their local retail purchases? It's upticked a little bit in a time of the online competition. Where cities see the decline, you necessarily haven't, and a lot of that has to do with the growth that's happened over the 6 years and the types of options that they have available in the community.
And also, we don't have a big mall. I mean, that's where you're seeing the real big impacts negatively.
The real, yeah, absolutely, the communities with the big mall. And so when you ask them just to think about the amount of purchases in Chaska compared to 3 years ago, 37% say it has increased, 9% decreased, and 54% have remained about the same. What about restaurants? Percent of meals eaten out in Chaska, an uptick in those saying no meals eaten out in Chaska, but that actually is more people saying they don't eat out, period, in essence. You do have, though, about 23% saying that they eat 25% of their meals out in Chaska in comparison to elsewhere. Now, what percent of their dollar is spent in Chaska? You have an uptick in the nothing, obviously correlating to not eating out, less of a dollar is being spent. So now, instead of being at 42%, saying 25% or more, it's 31%. And if you go back, that's why you have the demand in that characteristics chart with 48% saying, bring more dining options to us. And when we asked the question then, if there were more options for restaurants in the community, would it increase your dining? 50% said yes, 47% said no. Now, the question's going to be what restaurants to bring. I thought I fixed the error on that.
The error is?
In the label.
In the center, it says error.
It says error as a label. For some reason it came up, I thought I'll give you the exact, but needless to say, there's no consensus on precisely what sort of option. Family style leads the list at 13%, 9% fine dining, then we have all sorts of different ethnic, fast food, steakhouse. It's interesting, keeping in mind that 47% say more restaurant options wouldn't increase their dining in Chaska. Only 17% said that they don't see any need for any restaurant whatsoever. And 13% were unsure. 70% of people still had an idea of what sort of restaurant they would like in Chaska. Now, this is not atypical when you're in a growth area and demand increases. Still, if you look at Burnsville, they still have 30 to 40% of people saying they don't have enough restaurants. Ridgedale, Roseville, and Minnetonka. I don't know what kind of restaurants they could bring in that they don't have, but it is an insatiable demand. But really, when you have half the people saying, I would dine out more, the key is finding something that fits the bill for most of them. The perception of downtown and the development. 53% see the quality of development as improving the downtown. 6% say it's declined. 39% say it's remained about the same. A flat majority say over the time, the development in downtown and the quality has been improving. The importance on revitalizing downtown can't be understated. You almost have a flat majority saying it's very important, with 35% saying it's somewhat important. 83% of the community then says that the revitalization of downtown is at least somewhat important to them. Only 17% said not to or not at all. Now, frequency to downtown with visits to downtown, a little bit of it's kind of tipped, a little bit more visits downtown over the past couple of years. Last time, 24% indicated they rarely or never came. It's down to 20% saying rarely or never. It's kind of the sweet spot is somewhere between 2 to 3 to 4 times a month they're coming down. Not quite weekly, not quite every other week is the typical visit to downtown. Now, what's the primary purpose of coming downtown? 41% indicate it was for shopping, 14% services, 11% just to mill about, 11% dining, parks, trails, work, exercise, everything. But the primary reason for coming downtown at this point in time is shopping. What's missing? Well, restaurants. Only 13% point specifically to restaurants. 56% said they really didn't think that there were any specific establishments that are missing in downtown. So it's once again fine-tuning things instead of filling in an obvious gap in the minds of residents. How about the use of developmental financial incentives? Yep. It hasn't changed. It's actually more strong on the intensity. It was 82% in 2012 supported the city using financial incentives for development. It's 81% now, but the strong support has moved to statistically significant from 22 to 29%. Only 13% oppose the use of financial incentives for development. The Carver County Library, 61% indicated that they or members of their household had used the library during the past couple of years. 39% indicated they had not. In following up with the 39% that said no, asking why they haven't used the library, those reasons are arrayed on the right side of the chart. And the key reason, 32% of them indicated they had no interest. Then you have the electronic aspect of how people read now, with reading ebooks or use the internet at a combined 32%. 4%, I'm one of them, still buy the books. Really underrepresented. 7% no time, 12% no need. So it really is kind of a divide now amongst non-users of really they're not readers versus they're reading in different ways, and they don't see the library necessarily fulfilling it through electronic or e-readers. How does the community feel about the expansion of the Chaska Library? 81% support the expansion, 12% oppose the expansion. As a policy issue, if you look at the intensity, 37% strongly support, 2% strongly oppose. Now, it's important to say that this is in concept. There were no dollar figures attached. There were no specific plans. This is finding at the outset, and we typically do this when we work on referendums. You want to find if something is feasible in concept before you dive deeper into it. And so this definitely indicates the community is interested in this conversation. You know, it will matter in the details. How important is the expansion be in downtown Chaska? 64% said it's at least somewhat important. 29% said it's very important. Only 33% said it didn't matter. It was not to or not at all important. Now, continuing on the expansion, how likely would their household be to use an expanded library? Well, keeping in mind that 61% indicated that they or members of their household use the library, you now have 67% saying they're either very or somewhat likely to use it. And people kind of hedge on this because with the question of should it be in downtown or not downtown, the location will matter. You know, it's going to, people say it's going to depend. Now, the question then we follow up on referendum typically is, what level of a property tax increase would you support to expand the library? Now, keeping in mind you had 84% support in concept. 27% of the community said I wouldn't support any dollar amount. If this was a referendum, that's actually below the norm that we see on this question. The typical range for people saying that they support nothing for a school district referendum or a park bond referendum is 30 to 35% at the outset. You call it the core opposition. So it's under. It comes in, the average, roughly $4 to $5 a month would be reasonable at the outset. Now, the devil will be in the details, and the location would matter, what's being included. But the conversation is definitely, the community's ready to have the conversation and willing to have the conversation and willing to invest in a potential expansion if it comes to fruition. Park and rec facilities. 34% rate them excellent, 60% good, 4% only fair, nobody said poor. 94 to 4, top of the range in comparison to Metro on the overall rating of park and recreation facilities. Household use, very strong household use, not surprising with the demographics in the community, the amount of households with children. 39% indicated that they or members of their household at some point over the past few years have participated in a recreation program. I always joke with you have a 99% satisfaction rate that there is room to improve. But there's not much room to improve. You have very high usage and extraordinarily high satisfaction on the rec programs. So then an overall evaluation, do they feel that the mix of recreation programs meets the needs of their household? 91% yes, said yes, it does. Do the park and recreation amenities meet the needs of their household. 93% indicate that they do. So if you're looking at the breadth and if you're looking at the quality and the usage of facilities and programming, the city checks the box on all of those key findings. Travel, ease of getting around Chaska itself.
They didn't ask this question last week.
I'm not sure, was 41 torn up at the time?
Maybe
Yeah.
revisit it and ask it in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
After tomorrow.
You still had people in a good humor. 87% said it was excellent or good, 12% only fair. The excellent rating, 1 in 4 people said that travel within the city was not a problem. How do they normally get around the community? 84% use a car, 8% walk, 7% bicycle. 56% indicate that they leave Chaska on a regular basis. 26% indicate they did not. They worked within the city, and then 18% were not employed or retired. Of the 56% that leave Chaska on a regular basis, the rating of the commute was much higher than I thought it would be. And it's much higher than if we go back to before 212, opened up all
He
those.
says that because he has to drive out here for meetings.
Yes. I love 212. The 82% excellent and good, 18% only fair. Public transit, 41% indicated they or a member of their household had used public transit during the past 2 years. The rating on the experience, extraordinarily high. Southwest Transit, 55% excellent, combined 93% excellent and good. Awareness of Southwest Transit, well, you had 44% or 41% indicated that they had used public transit. The awareness increased quite a bit. 69% said they were aware. And even then, you're tapping into the grapevine then. Not necessarily their own personal use of the system, but what are they hearing? And this nets out positive, as opposed to some of the other public transit systems that when you're tapping into the grapevine, going beyond users to what they hear about the particular service, Southwest Transit is very well regarded within that. Of the 70% of residents aware, 86% rate the service favorably. And then finally, communications.
Kevin?
And this is
He's new, he's new.
I see an uptick there, though. And excellent.
You got the gift card? No. This is an important point to make with all the news you've seen and in a positive light. Sometimes you would say potentially residents aren't as connected as they had been. And that is simply not the case. It was 81%, you now have 82%, a doubling in the excellent rating of the overall communications coming from the city. So residents really feel good across the board, and they're doing it with a higher level of information, at least self-described higher levels of information. Now, where are they getting information? The light blue bar is them telling us what their primary source of information is. So the Chaska Herald at 37%.
How about that, Alex?
Look at our head pop up.
Here you go.
The city website at 34%, and then everything pales. It's 71% of communication is either the Herald or the website. Now, the dark blue bar is how they would prefer to receive information. So the Chaska Herald goes down to 30, the city website goes down to 21. Now mailings jump up. They want specific mailings when an issue comes up, nothing broad, and then email comes up. If we look and kind of put them into pots versus written versus electronic, the community's divided in how they want to receive information. About 45% are interested in some sort of written, about 45% are interested in electronic. So the need for communications to still straddle that line will be necessary for the upcoming few years. Cable television, 59% indicated that they had cable, 27% satellite, and the neither is up to 14%. 1 in 7 would be the cord cutters, shall we say. Viewership of city council meetings?
That can't be true. We have 2.1 million viewers. How can that be?
Well, spouses may be watching.
Oh.
But no, it's,
I doubt they are.
you have 8% saying frequently and occasionally. And sometimes, I always joke with councils, though. The higher the ratings of council meetings oftentimes indicate a much
more
higher level of
controversy?
dysfunction
Oh, yeah,
on a council.
There we go.
Yeah, the highest ratings we ever had was before I started surveying back in '94. This was in the '80s when a certain former governor was mayor of Brooklyn Park and firing city managers on camera. That was must-see TV. The frequent and occasionally was 45, 50%. It greater ratings than Seinfeld at the time. So it's out there. They feel that if they need to, they can access it. But there's nothing that rises to the fact that they need to watch at this point in time. They're very content with how things are. The website, 93% indicate that they had access to the internet. You only have 7% now that have no internet access. 72% of the 93% said that they had accessed the city's website, so about just under 70% of the community as a whole, and 94% found what they sought. So however what's ever been done, that is extraordinarily high on a website being able to find. The threshold on that one is 80% of people that access a website being able to find what they're looking for. And then finally, social media. I set this up, it's a two-part question. First off, do they use the social media? What's arrayed are the users. So 83% of the community uses Facebook. The second part of the question is, how likely would you be to use that social media source to access city information? That's then 63% of the community saying that they would use that Facebook for that. YouTube, 68% watch YouTube, 45% would you watch or access city information via YouTube, then Twitter, then Instagram, and then blogs specifically. There's a key, obviously dominant with Facebook, followed by YouTube, and Twitter over the past couple years, because of national usage of Twitter, has gone down. That used to be a very solid second place. And people now have become more uncomfortable with using it as a way to gather information, simply because you can't go as in-depth as you can in other veins of social media. So there was a lot of information. I'd be happy to answer any more questions you might have.
So can we get a single hauler or not?
Depends if you want to upset.
They're not ripe for that yet.
Yeah.
It's
Garbage
working
may be
on it.
right, but-
Yeah.
I think it's something that warrants conversation, especially when the perception, on cost and street maintenance and everything, it is there. But that tension and that right to
You
choose
don't have
your
to go
hauler,
too deep. I was just playing with you.
most communities that
Nobody's, after seeing this, nobody's watching anyway, so I'm not getting my message out. Well, I tell you what, we've had a couple really tough council meetings over the last month, and this is it's very nice to get news like this, and to hear our comparisons to where we sit in the metro area and our ratings and things like that. It's, it just it tells us that
We're on the right track.
our hard work is starting to pay off, and it's starting to show. And we've had a couple, like I said, over the last month, we've had a couple tough council meetings, but this group over the last 5 years has made some tough and critical decisions. And I'm not only talking us, I'm talking staff, everyone included. The whole city of Chaska has made some big decisions, and to me, this is telling us that the things we've done, some of them have been gambles, have paid off. And that's really encouraging, and it's great news for once to come out of here and feel good.
That's the only way to look at it, is it does validate decisions that have been made in the past, because poor decisions will come up in a survey like this when you're gauging public opinion. And with the benefit, I mean, there are very few communities, I mean, some of the data I put up here, I've been with the company since '94, predates me. And so you have the luxury of comparison of history, and they're doing extraordinarily well in comparison to history, and then the very strong comparisons to what we're seeing with trends over the metro area over the past 18 to 24 months does validate a lot of the things that have happened in the city in the next 5 to 6 years.
Now, from all of your notes, how you explained how we compared, we're in the top 5 and that, do we get that, or is that just your commentary that goes along with this?
Yeah,
Not the city names.
yeah, yeah. You won't get the chart with saying yes, yes. But it is, and with the summary that we write up, we talk about some of those, some of the key issues.
Because I mean, I think that,
Top deciles.
you know, it's awesome that you shared it here, but like I said,
You saw what
other
person
than
watched this.
other than the 5 that weren't at the fire station and us sitting here, we're the only ones that saw it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it'd be great, like,
Because Alex is here.
oh, that's right,
And
that's
according
our
to-
high,
That's our number one
that's our
source.
number one source of
And she
information.
still has job security.
But
There we go.
But I think it's also nice that when we have our employee appreciation, that some of these numbers, obviously Matt would love to go over this for like 7 hours, but we can probably narrow it down to like a 15 minutes
Precedes me.
about the good things that, but I mean, you talk about the services that our employees are showing. Those are the things that when you get it on a survey from the residents, those are the things that you want to put out at employee recognition. And I don't want Matt to blow it, so that's why I was wondering if you had those. Is it kind of picking on you night tonight or what?
Yes, geez.
Yeah, you're spreading it around.
But,
Not that I would think that Matt would blow it, Mr.
no,
Mayor.
he wouldn't.
But
That's what I was wondering.
It's oftentimes when a city falls into, you know, what we would classify kind of as the best practices, they oftentimes want this news shared with staff. And I'm more than willing to come out at a staff meeting when it's convenient and do a 15, 20-minute, you know, they don't necessarily need to hear about garbage hauling and
Right.
2 to 4 year
No, I
terms for the
think
mayor.
it'd be important.
But to give it context and share, because
Yeah.
I think staff hears from the 10% that
Right.
are unhappy.
Yeah, I
the
think
other-
it's a-
Well, I was gonna say, the other part of it is the whole reason that we don't do these surveys internally, there's a credibility issue. I mean, it's not real credible for us to go out and do a survey and come
Right.
up with, I
We
mean.
can
it-
come out and say how good we are all day long, but this
Right.
is living proof of it.
and so-
Independent, yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with you.
But I think it also goes back to like, for Kevin, for instance, who I pick on because he's sitting here, it tells him which social media sources are the strong sources to use. So it hits so many different people, but a different way.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the public works guys might like the thing about the haulers because they might not do as much damage to the street. So everybody takes information a different way.
Absolutely.
And I mean, obviously, we'd have to pick this pieces and parts because there's no way we would do this at a employee recognition and
No.
taking that much time. They get too antsy.
I think there's some definite key slides in there. that
Absolutely.
You could share.
Without a
us.
doubt.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that really speaks highly upon what they do on a day-in, day-out basis.
Yep. Without a doubt.
And I certainly appreciated, you know, taking the time to explain what the different things, the nuances meant, but also some of the comparisons that you said across the metro. That was very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a
Luke, I
pleasure.
think you look like you have
My
something.
question was that what the people liked about the city of Chaska. 17% was a small-town feel. Schools were way down at like 7%. But I read someplace not long ago that our school district was in the top 4% in the nation. And I thought that was important to people to buying homes here and that, and I would have thought that would be higher, or is that because it was the city of Chaska was doing the survey?
Part of it is when you say that, because in order to get through, it's not a blind survey, so we want to tell them we've been retained by the city of Chaska. So they tend to think city versus school.
Okay.
Some cities will delve into more to understand the quality of life aspects, the quality of schools, public safety, other items, and ask importance and ratings and everything like that. And it's always public safety and schools at the top of the list for importance overall. But it does tip when you're looking at this is the population as a whole. And we have, this time around, that we had 61% that were empty nesters. So 39% in the sample had kids. So that in and of itself limits it. And that is only coding the first response. I mean, I mentioned we had 12% stay on the phone with us for over an hour. They probably listed 6 things. What we code is the first thing that comes to mind, and then that's what's arrayed on it. So, I mean, schools are a core value, but normally on a city survey, you have to cue them on public schools to think, because most people think separately between city and school district.
I don't know, anybody else have questions?
No questions. It was just really a lot of interesting information. I mean, there was.
It's interesting. I
you
don't-
know, some of your insight behind some of those slides as well was very helpful as well. Appreciate that. And it was, I don't know, it just really kind of pretty incredible. I mean,
Yeah,
there's really
like I
a
said.
ton of information there that really said a lot, you know. I mean, I was really
quite
impressed
frankly,
with
that's
how
why
that,
we've
how
always-
those questions, all those questions came across and what.
That's why we have gone back and utilized these guys for so long, is that they know what they're doing, they know how to get the responses from people, and then how to interpret what's being said, and then have that comparison to the rest of the metro area. I mean, I think that's, all those things are really critical if you're gonna have a story to tell. Otherwise, it's just you're looking at things in just a bubble or a vacuum.
But I like the history.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
that to go
Looking at
back
the
so many
trends.
years.
You were
and,
watching when other mayors were, what it was the comparison to other
Well,
mayors.
Ripke, he can talk community all day long. We're winning that. Say that out loud on camera? Oh, boy.
On camera.
1% are watching
Uh-oh.
frequently.
There's your 1% right there.
Hey, Mike, how you doing at editing?
And also thanks, Matt, for having this come back on a meeting that was a little
Yeah.
quieter,
Well, I
because some of those
just-
other
I
ones.
mean-
Yeah, it
Too
was
much information to do on one of those late
I
nights.
mean, you can see,
so.
we spent hour
Oh,
and
yeah.
15 minutes here. I mean, this is something this is really important stuff, because, you know, this is good information, but we also have to remember why we did this survey. I mean, it's to understand what people's perceptions are and where we need to improve and what we need to be focused on. But keep in mind, the last retreat that we had, we talked about how are we going to plan for when we're a city that's fully developed, and how do we make sure that we're doing things in the right way. Part of it is a question about the perception of how do our residents view us. The other part is sort of the analytics of looking at how do we compare to other cities and how they're actually providing the services. So one's a perception and one's actual analytical look, and both are equally important to come up with the answer, because it doesn't really matter what we do. If the perception of what our residents think is not good, then we're not doing it right.
The question came up to me several times about where do you get the 400 people randomly selected so that it really does represent a good cross-section of the city?
It's with landlines, we know obviously the area code and prefix is coming in. And then we just randomly digitize. The computer sets up randomly. And then I filter through the computer. to come up with, you know, if they're listed, we know it's a good number. They might live outside the city of Chaska, but share the prefix and everything, and then it's a screening process. On cell phones, we purchase a list based on providers and billing centers. Incredible amount of information out there. The only thing I have to promise is that I'm not using it to sell anything, or the list providers will not share that information with me at the level that they're able to share it with a polling firm.
Right.
Than others. And then what it is you, with updated census information, we know the percent of households that are renters, the percent of households with seniors, with children and everything. And as you're going through and completing the calls, it obviously is taking time, and you're monitoring that to make sure, because, you know, it is possible with, and that's why it's 95 out of 100 cases, the statistical caveat, you might call all of Ward 1. It's possible. But as you're monitoring it going through and you're making sure that you had a good representation with the census and the demographics. But it's a simple, once I have a cell phone number and a landline number, it's all random. I don't know names or anything. The only time we ask for any clarifying information, because confidentiality is promised, is if I don't know the address, so I can place them into a ward. And then we simply ask for the nearest cross street. We don't ask for the address because that violates, but people get concerned when you're asking that sort of information.
Sounds good, thank you.
So as a follow-up to this, we'll be getting this, the full presentation out so people can see it. But then again, we're also going to be working with Kevin to do a deeper dive into different pieces of this to, you know, basically look at a closer look at each of these and really sort of add in the context that Peter helped provide.
Well, like I said, it was interesting. I was here in 12, but I don't remember as strong as I do today how much this information, maybe because this one is better.
Well, and remember where we were in 12.
Yeah, we were in a
We
tough
weren't in the
spot.
best of economic
Right.
conditions at
Right.
the time either, so.
Right.
No, but I think that really states a lot when you looked at those years going back. I mean, a lot of the reason why we are where we are is because of the work we did in those times. And the
Yeah.
decisions you made then are what are coming to fruition now.
Yes, yeah, because, a decision you make usually doesn't get fully implemented for a couple of years
Right.
before people,
5
years, yeah, 5 years before people notice it. No, you're right.
So,
Excellent.
cool. And I'm gonna echo that too. One of the meetings that we had that was a challenging meeting for all of us was, you would have come in right after that, and it just would not have been good timing, nor would the message, I don't know that we would have probably felt as good about the message after maybe the outcome of that meeting, but.
You didn't want to sit here till 11 either.
Well, we'd have been here till about 2:20 for to finish.
They
this
offered
up.
me the option, and I think it makes sense. I mean, an hour and 15 minutes is a
For
long
time, too.
presentation, even if you start at
Absolutely.
7:30.
Right.
So I
This
think it
is
was
far
a wise
better.
decision.
Yeah, on a less busy
Very
agenda.
good.
Good news.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Awesome, very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Very good news.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice words. I'm sure that you put some of them in there as well, so. Well, where are we? Anything else on this before we kind of close the door or move on?
No, it's very nice to hear.
Yep. And for anyone that may pick this up on a replay or anything, this will eventually go on our website, I assume, Matt, and all that?
Yep.
Because 94% of the people can find anything they want on our website. So
Facebook,
I paid attention
Facebook
once.
number one.
You see that, Kevin?
Wait, when did you start, March? Yeah. I would say.
Wait till you get 3 years under your belt. Look out. That'll be like 99 and a half, right? All right. Again, any final, otherwise we'll move on.
Very good.
Okay, awesome, all right. So we'll move on to item number 9, bills. Anyone got a concern or question on a bill? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the bills.
Motion by Councilmember Schultz,
I'll second that.
second by Councilmember Bo to pay the bills. Discussion. Hearing none, Nate, we call roll.
Councilmember Schultz,
Yes.
Councilmember Bo,
Yes.
Councilmember Geisler.
Yes.
Mayor Winchell.
Yes. We'll move on to other business. Councilmember Geisler.
Okay, just a couple of little things. I did see a post today that 41 could open tomorrow evening and not all the way to Friday.
Yeah.
I hope that's true. So everybody's been dying for it. The crews have done a remarkable job, and I just got to say, not only have they worked quick and in a very confined area, but they've done a beautiful job and fast. I think this is way faster than I even expected to see it done. I think they even had till the end of September, but obviously aren't going to take that long. So hopefully it's open tomorrow evening. And also, I don't want to be remiss. I want to say happy birthday to Councilmember Bo, who just had a birthday on Saturday. So happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
And also there's going to be an open house for reviewing, the public to review, our 2040 comprehensive plan. It's going to be an open house here on Thursday, September 13th, from 6 to 7:30, but here in the chambers.
Who's running that?
Kevin and,
Okay.
yep.
So it's a good opportunity for people to see what the long-range plan is that Chaska's laid out, and it gets tweaked all the time, but I mean, as far as growth and development, street repairs, replacements, things like that, correct?
We have one of the, I guess, enhanced sections of the comp plan this time around is the Park and Rec section. And they just got done doing a survey that was out there to talk about what do people think we should be focusing on in the future. The park board tonight is actually having some discussions looking at that list and creating some priorities for the comp plan. So that'll be a sort of a new addition that we're looking at there. That's too bad.
And have we done this before? We've had an open house?
Yeah, we always have an
His eyes fell off.
we do an open house every time we go through the.
Do we? Okay.
So when will we start looking really at that?
So it'll come, so what we do is we get public feedback from, we had the survey that went out and open house and things like that. And then we bring back some sort of thought processes that happen based on feedback that we've got to start shaping things based on, what we hear from you guys after you get some feedback. We'll provide that feedback from the public and that.
Okay.
We have to, we're on target to really be sort of the beginning January, February time frame to actually get that submitted in.
It's kind of short notice, but it's this Thursday, 6 o'clock, council chambers. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Bo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had two things I wanted to mention. The Guardian Angels Fall Festival will coincide with the downtown block party on 2nd Street, and that is coming up on Saturday, the 29th of September. And I know either one of those will be fun. You put them both together on the same weekend, and that'll be a whole lot of fun. So that'll be good for downtown. Also, very pleased to hear that the city of Chaska won the taste test for the best tasting water in the state of Minnesota at the state fair,
Yeah.
which is phenomenal to hear. So
Kudos to the water department.
absolutely.
And all the work that they do.
Yeah, that's,
Absolutely.
people give a lot of grief about the hardness of the water, but it tastes good.
And it's good for you.
Yeah.
Provides those trace minerals everyone needs for a good, healthy life. So,
Yeah.
very good. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
Just a quick question regarding Veterans Park. We have a target date for completion. Was up there over the weekend as well as
Yep.
we were out cruising around, I mentioned earlier, and looking like it's coming along nice.
Yeah.
Pretty excited about it.
So it should be the beginning of October when it's done, but we're working with the VFW and the Legion on two things. One is they're looking at Veterans Day of actually having a dedication
Oh, okay.
ceremony over there. And then the second thing is the challenge coins that were discussed as part of it, to start talking about how we collect them, how we manage them, how we get them into the sort of computer system that people will be able to get their stories in. So Marshall and his crew have been reaching out to the VFW and the Legion to sort of start that process up.
All right, great. That's all I have. October.
Yeah. Yep.
In addition to the first place for tasty water, our fire explorers took third place in a competition at the state fair as well. So kudos to them. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
They've done a good job with those explorers, and now we're starting to see a bunch of them join as they get
Wonderful.
to the age of, that they can fully join. That's happening too, so that's kind of, it's a nice feeder program into the fire department for, especially, you know, something that's as hard to recruit now. And you already know them a little bit, and they know our system, so it's kind of a good deal.
And so important for the
So it's-
community.
It's been a good thing, so. Anything else, sir?
The Formicote site, I don't know if you've driven by that recently, but.
Looks nice, looks different.
The site that Formicote owns is now fully cleared of concrete and everything that was there, so.
Will they be in the east or the west half of that?
To be the west
Total
half.
west half,
Yep,
okay.
and that's the portion that we put the priority on clearing the
Gotcha.
site.
Okay.
So if you drive by, you'll see on the east half, there's.
There's some rubble.
The concrete's still there, there's rubble on top, but.
They're actually
that's all
crushing
being
today.
crushed. Okay, great.
They were starting to take down concrete piles. So.
Excellent.
Are they gonna put a shovel in pretty soon, Formicote? I thought they were in,
Yeah, so there's two pieces of it. They had the, it gets down to their financing. They had financing for purchases of land, which was separate from their building, so they had that done when we closed on the property, and they're just finishing up the financing for their building then to break ground, so.
okay. Okay. Anything else, sir?
That's it, yeah.
Matt?
One thing I'll share, Luke shared this with me and found out that Joel Smith passed away today.
Oh,
He was our city attorney back in the late 60s.
And was this,
And
was
was our,
the attorney for the Jonathan Corporation all through that, wasn't he?
yeah,
Lifelong resident of Chaska.
Yeah.
Yep.
Met Council
Joel
representative.
Smith?
Jules Smith.
Jules
Yep.
Smith.
He was our Met Council representative for probably
Years.
a decade, at least a decade.
was that today, did you say? or-
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like that.
apparently, that's why I got to apologize for leaving, but Rob Repke was out in Maine now, he called me, this is the second time he called me today. So I assumed it must be important, and I don't know how he heard about it, but Senator Jules passed away.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, so a lot of history with our organization and.
Yeah, they
Jonathan.
recognized him a year ago at Jonathan at their 50-year celebration, that he was one of the guest speakers, and
And Bob and I had lunch with him last week and talked about all the history and everything like that,
Yeah.
from 11:30 to almost 3.
well, condolences to the family.
Yes.
I know
That's
some are
too
still
bad.
around there, so.
Yep.
Otherwise, no work session next week, but we will have a council meeting. So
That's right.
I have that coming up. And then we're back to a regular schedule after that.
Okay. Anybody else? No. You got anything, Kevin? All right.
I've got just one, sorry.
Yep, go
something else
ahead.
I just thought of that kind of happened a while ago, but really kudos to all the volunteers and the staff for Curling Night in America.
Oh, yeah.
That was just, I was able to get down there for a couple of nights, volunteered for one of the nights. What an event.
Yeah, it was
That was really
incredible.
put together in such a short
Phenomenal.
time frame that they had to put everything together and to pull it off as smoothly as it went. What an event, an incredible experience, ton of fun.
Positive comments from folks.
Positive comments from,
That's your DDRs.
yeah, from a lot of the curlers, you know, just really highly spoken of the facility here, and it was kind of funny, you know, I was chatting with the Italian team for a while there, and, you know, and thanked them for coming out, and, you know, they were almost gushing over, no, thank you, thanks for, you know, they were so happy that they got to participate in it, you know, it was just a lot of fun to be a part of and see happen. So looking forward to watching the actual airing of the episodes in October, I think.
Yep.
October 12th, they start. So, pretty exciting.
Matt, do you want to touch on?
Yeah, I guess I'll touch on then, I put in the biweekly, something coming out of that, and we had been in some discussions beforehand, is the U.S. Curling Association turning the Chaska Curling Center into their official training center for their high-performance teams. So their high-performance teams are people who either are Olympians or in the future probably will be.
In the pipeline of
In the
Olympians.
pipeline, yep. And so, I put in there that there's a number of things from a criteria perspective that I think is really important for our curling club that, first and foremost, we have to make sure that our leagues and members are taken care of. That's our bread and butter for the facility. It's what makes it a community place. But then looking at how do we actually utilize having those high-performance players there, how does that enhance our ability to help our members through doing curling clinics, or even more specifically juniors, and trying to have a goal in the future that we grow somebody from Chaska here to potentially be in the Olympics someday. And then when you get to those world competitions and Olympic competitions, when they put on the screen home curling club, you'll say Chaska, Minnesota. So
Oh, and even if it doesn't work out, I mean, this is something that's coming down from USA Curling. This isn't Minnesota Curling. This is USA Curling. They've recognized this place as the place to be for training, and that's what just even having these conversations to me, I think are just a huge compliment to really all the staff and
absolutely.
the facility.
And you can see it happening already. I mean, we haven't officially done anything yet with an agreement, but I was over later on Friday afternoon and I saw the Dropkin team, who is a high performance team, practicing over there, and then I was down there on Sunday, yesterday afternoon, and there was a high performance person, so they're already there.
Wow.
I mean, they like the facility so much that this is where they prefer to be.
Right.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's just we can't officially acknowledge it,
Yeah.
right? And I think another neat thing that would come out of that is if we did become the training headquarters or whatever, you'd probably be able to put the Olympic rings
That's
on
if
the
we
wall.
become the Olympic training facility, which is sort of the next step, but actually it's easier to get that designation after we get the USA Curling designation, so.
Oh, see, I thought that
Yeah,
all
it's
went
sort of
hand in-
two-
I thought it was hand in hand,
No,
okay.
well, it sort of is, but
Right.
it's two separate designations, but if we do one, it makes sense to do the other.
Okay, cool.
But even during the curling night in America, I spoke to Matt Hamilton, and he said, this is just such a beautiful facility. I was talking to he and his sister, and he said, it's just amazing how your community has embraced curling. And he said, I love practicing here. He said, I love playing here. So that was a pretty high compliment coming from a gold medalist.
And I forgot the gentleman, the head of the U.S. Curling, but he told,
Rick Paxke?
yeah, Rick, I was talking to him, and he was telling me about how our 10 o'clock crowds were bigger than some of the evening crowds they had at other places. And I thought that was a real thing. And I thought when John Schuster at the very end called out Scott Belvich for the ice, and he kept talking about the quality of the ice. So it's not only the structure, it's what's within the structure as well. So that's what makes things
Absolutely.
so much better, so.
Yeah, they were nervous about doing the event on a weekday, because typically they'll do them on weekends, and so those daytime events don't end up being as hard to fill because people aren't working.
Yeah.
So to do it on a weekday and still get those crowds, they were pretty impressed by that. And that was huge. I mean, we got one person right there, Kevin and Susan and Jeff and Scott Belvich and, the Park and Rec staff who spent their entire 3 days down there, staffing it, and it was pretty special. It was really neat.
All the members who volunteered. too.
And the members, I mean, it was incredible how many members were there throughout the entire time.
I saw a majority of my Wednesday night league down there, I mean, everyone we've played against is down there wearing volunteer shirts. It was a lot of fun.
And they took a lot of pride in it. I mean, they
Absolutely.
viewed it as their facility that they took a lot of pride in.
It was fabulous.
Anything else? Okay. I just have a couple things. I forgot at the last council meeting, we had a grand opening for Dr. Body, which is right next to
Oh, yeah.
the Holiday there, that he opened a surgery center that he can do and will be doing soon, all kinds of different surgeries that you don't need to go downtown for. I
He's
mean,
a GI doctor.
it's not only GI though, he can do, they can do knee surgeries.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's a surgery center.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me to get in my brain, but he's gonna have other general surgeons there, he's already hooked up with a team. I don't even understand a lot of it, but it's not only his GI work there, but he can do things now here that he had to go to other facilities, that he's kind of a one-of-a-kind guy that can do some of these things, and he can now do them, it's a pretty awesome facility when you, he took me around, I was surprised how big it is. I mean,
It's a perfect use for that building too, because you almost need a destination type of use.
Yeah.
I mean, that building sat empty for a long time, but having that type of destination use will give it a good long-term viable.
And he's gonna buy that last cube out now, that Wausau Homes, I think was thinking about moving, I think he's gonna buy out his lease and then he'll end up owning the whole building by the time it's done. So.
Been under
Best of luck
construction on
to
that for a long time.
But it's, and he was so grateful that we were all part of it, so it's pretty cool. The other thing I kinda mentioned is the fire department had their open house. Again, that's something that really showcases our fire department and seeing the traffic out there. It kinda goes back to our study that people believe that, the services we provide are really great, and that's another service that is provided, and, it looked very well attended. Unfortunately, we were unable to get there because of our earlier meeting that we had, so, congratulations to the fire department on that. Question for you, Matt. All the lights that we put in the boulevard on 61 for lighting the trees, they don't light up. Is there something going, or does anybody know what,
I'll
I've
find
been
out.
meaning to look at that, and I came home the other night and it was dark, and I came down that way, and there's none of them on.
And those poles,
There's
are
a
they
lot
gonna-
of them,
yeah.
so.
Those
I
poles,
think-
are they gonna have flags on them eventually?
They will, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll find out about that.
And I did go over to Veterans Park like Friday, and they were starting to lay the granite rings
Oh,
out.
good.
It looked like it was an interesting process. The guy, he takes like a dry and just dampens it a little bit, and then he makes the pad, and then eventually that hardens and must draw the moisture in, and that's what it sits on, so that, I thought it was interesting. They got most of the pillars and all the sayings on and I'm trying to get myself orientated, and they were putting the metal over the top, kind of what do you call those? Yeah, on a patio. Yeah, those things on a patio, what do you call them?
Gazebo?
Pergola, yeah.
Yeah,
pergola.
like a pergola type thing,
Pergola.
only metal.
Planner here has
Yeah.
to tell us.
But it's definitely, and the pavilion is really nice now. It's really, I mean, it's nice. And then I think the only thing they're missing there is a railing.
Yeah.
And then there'll be the final landscaping. But I think they got a ways to go on that. And the archery range, I believe, is all done. I think we had to do some modifications there, extend the fence.
What was
That's
that?
good.
We had to
daughter
make
was-
sure that nobody peeked around
Well,
the backside.
This
My
fence went
daughter
out.
was worried about that.
This fence went out, and I thought, I looked at it, I went,
It didn't go
is
all
that
the way
it?
in.
And the guy goes, yep, that's what the plans show. And he goes, it's probably not right, is it? I go, I don't think so. So they've extended it, but they're still gonna have to probably put a
Yeah, it's-
return or something there, so nobody, what are they doing in here? Yeah,
Pretty
not
clear it
even,
wasn't
it's
gonna
not
work.
even funny, but it's funny, you know.
It's funny because we caught it now.
Right.
It would've been so funny if we had.
But I know that there are people, and I think I just saw archery just opened up for deer today, that the elevated stands, like they had asked for, there's elevated and standing ones, and there's, I think, 4 different ranges. 3 or 4, I don't know.
4, I think.
Is it 4? Okay, so that's really coming together well, and, so it's starting to get there. Like I said, they were starting to do some of the landscaping and stuff like that, so I'm hoping that Veterans Day, that there's nothing else missing, or I don't know, there's a lot of electrical pieces that have to go in there yet, but it'll be exciting to see it when it's all done.
It's
so.
moving fast now.
I talked to a couple of those guys there, and they said, we've done a few of these, but this one's pretty fancy, so it'll be cool.
Very good.
Kind of goes back to what Rich Daniel said. I've been to a lot of them, but he said this one's really different and really nice, so exciting.
Well, and it's, the interesting thing I keep on hearing them saying, we've heard the Legion say it too, is that they're really serious about calling it Service Plaza as opposed to a memorial. You know, that it's really, you know, it's dedicated to people who served.
Right.
So,
I can't wait to see it finished and used and enjoyed and
Exactly.
visited and, yes, can't wait.
There was something else, but I don't remember anymore, and I'm good. Last call?
Mr. Mayor, one more thing if I may.
Okay.
Matt, I've had a few people chomping at the bit to chomp at a donut, and so I wanted to ask for an update on Dunkin' Donuts.
yeah, so they've submitted their demolition permit in now, so we closed on the property, I don't know, it was beginning of August. But it was closed in the escrow because there was some, there's all these detailed title work things that had to get done before it could be officially closed. And so they got that all done, I don't know, maybe a week and a half ago.
Something like that, yep.
And so now they have a demo permit in, so I think you'll see things start to move in short order after that. But the detail stuff on title had to be taken care of before they could actually move forward with stuff.
So we still should see groundbreaking like very shortly and completion maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Nate, if you have a better sense, but I mean, it's definitely gonna be in the fall time.
Yeah, last I talked to the developer, they were shooting to start, you know, knocking down buildings middle September, so we're getting close to middle September. That was maybe about a week or so ago that I got that, so I don't know if things have changed substantially since then.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I remember the thing, they are moving dirt up on the Chipotle and all
I
these
saw
sites.
that.
So
Yes. Yep.
they're moving, there's talk that they want to be open by Christmas?
Oh, boy.
Yes, no?
Got a lot of
Did I
work
hear
to do.
that? Not Aldi?
Not
Okay.
Aldi.
I thought I'd heard
Aldi
that.
needs to open in the spring, and
Okay.
to be, they always open in the spring to be ready 6 months later for the holiday season.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if the other two open sometime early winter.
Okay. But it's all being done at the same?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's all I have. Anyone else?
No, sir.
All right, well, we're back here next Monday now. We have two back-to-backs, so, because of Labor Day holiday. So we will be back here next Monday, so.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Councilmember Bo,
Second that.
second by Councilmember Geisler. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, pose same sign. We are adjourned. Have a